President Trump says that he has seized control of law enforcement in Washington, D.C., and he's deploying the National Guard to cut down on crime. But D.C.'s local leaders are fighting back.
Democrats introduced legislation that could strip Trump of power he's been weaponizing against federal judges, and what it means is absolutely devastating for Trump's control over courts. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, standing with a group of Democratic senators and representatives, unveiling Marshals Act, maintaining authority and restoring security to halt abuse of law act. And what this bill does is transfer control of U.S. Marshal Service from executive branch to judicial branch, takes nation's oldest law enforcement agency away from Trump, away from Attorney General Pam Bondi, away from Department of Justice, and hands it to Chief Justice John Roberts and federal judiciary. That means Trump can no longer order marshals to ignore court orders, can't tell them to stop protecting judges, can't weaponize them to intimidate government officials. His legal shield is collapsing, his power over enforcement is disappearing, and Washington is in absolute meltdown because everyone knows what this means. Trump loses ability to defy courts, loses control over judicial security, loses everything. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Patrick Smith Show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into why this legislation is so explosive because context matters here. U.S. Marshals Service was created in 1789. Nation's oldest federal law enforcement agency, and its primary mission is protecting federal judges and enforcing court orders. But there's problem. Marshals report to Attorney General. Attorney General reports to President. So Trump controls agency whose job is protecting judges. Trump is attacking and enforcing orders Trump is defying. That's insane conflict of interest. That's set up for constitutional crisis. And that's exactly what Democrats are trying to fix. Share this video with everyone you know because Schumer laid it out explicitly. Said Trump's tenure has been marked by corruption, chaos, and abuse. That administration is waging war against rule of law. That they will not allow Trump and Bondi to interfere with marshals as they enforce court orders, or weaponize them to intimidate government employees or American citizens. That Senate Democratic leader saying Trump is actively threatening to misuse Marshal Service. That danger is real. That Congress must act. Think about what that means. Schumer isn't speculating about hypothetical future threats. He's responding to actual pattern of Trump behavior. Trump already pulled security details from Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and Biden's children. Former officials who Trump views as enemies just revoked their protection, left them vulnerable. And if Trump can do that to former cabinet members and presidential family, he can absolutely do it to federal judges. Can order marshals to stop protecting judges who rule against him, can leave them exposed to threats, to violence, to intimidation, and threats against judges are surging. This year alone, Marshals Service investigated almost 400 threats to federal judges, with 162 judges facing threats just between March and April. That's unprecedented. And much of intimidation comes as pizza doxing. Federal judges receiving unsolicited pizza deliveries to their homes, deliveries listed in name of Daniel Anderl, late son of Judge Esther Salas, who was killed by gunmen targeting his mother. That's terrorists using dead child's name to threaten judges, to signal they know where judges live, to make clear judges aren't safe. Make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith Show because Democratic senators explained crisis perfectly. Said since 1789, U.S. Marshals have valiantly protected nation's judges and enforced court orders. But their dual accountability to executive branch and judicial branch paves way toward constitutional crisis. To ensure these necessary functions are carried out, Congress must act to move bureau into judicial branch. Marshals are critical to protecting rule of law, and they must be able to do their jobs without political interference. And what Democrats are describing is already happening. Trump administration has violated federal judicial orders relating to federal funding, freedom of press, deportation of immigrants without due process. Judges have found Trump officials in contempt, have threatened prosecution, and primary tool at disposal of judges is holding Trump lawyers in contempt of court, which usually begins with fine, but can escalate to jail time if administration continues refusing to comply with court orders. Think about what that means. Here's problem with current system. Entity charged with enforcing criminal contempt of court order by making arrest is U.S. Marshals Service, but Marshals are under control of executive branch. So if judge orders Trump official arrested for contempt, Trump could simply order Marshals not to enforce court order, could tell them ignore judge, don't make arrest. And Marshals would have to choose between obeying president who controls their jobs or obeying judge whose orders they're supposed to enforce. That renders judicial branch powerless over Trump administration. That's constitutional crisis. By moving oversight of Marshals from executive branch to judicial branch, this problem disappears, because federal judges would control agency enforcing their own orders, would ensure compliance, would have power to actually hold Trump accountable. Trump loses his shield, loses his veto over judicial enforcement, and that terrifies him. Democratic lawmakers added that Trump administration has repeatedly undermined judicial independence and misused Marshals Service for political gain. That they've politicized Marshals Service by intimidating government officials, threatening federal workers, potentially risking security of federal judges. That this bill restores Marshals Service independence by placing it within judicial branch so it can fulfill core mission of protecting judges and enforcing court orders without political interference. Share this video because Democrats said they've seen threats against judges escalate as president has threatened impeachment of those who rule against him. Have seen administration pull security from former officials who are still at risk because president views them as enemies. Have seen president ignore court orders he doesn't like. That U.S. Marshals are central to preserving democracy and upholding rule of law. Marshals must be able to protect all judges, enforce all court orders, and have independence necessary to do their jobs. Think about what they're referencing. Trump calling for Judge Boasberg's impeachment after Boasberg ruled against Trump's deportation flights. Trump attacking judges on social media, calling them partisan hacks, USA-hating judges, so-called judges, threatening them publicly, and his supporters responding with death threats, with harassment, with intimidation. Pattern is clear. Trump attacks judge. MAGA mob threatens judge. Judge needs protection, but protection comes from agency Trump controls. See the problem. House Democratic leaders said they're seeing rise in outrageous attacks on federal judges simply for doing their jobs. That Congress must act to make sure courts have reliable personal, physical, and electronic security to count on. Security not subject to discretionary whims of president who may disrespect judicial independence and rule of law. That this legislation is necessary to fortify independence of judicial branch, which is essential to survival of strong democracy. That they'll ensure U.S. Marshals can perform duties without political interference or coercive pressure from president or anyone else in executive branch. Please make sure you're subscribed because Democrats made crucial point. Said today independent judges must rely upon executive branch whose cases are often in front of them for personal security. That they've seen how threats of violence to members of Congress pressure them into staying silent or influence their votes. That they cannot allow same calculations to creep into deliberations of independent judges. That judges should be in charge of their own security. They're in constitutional crisis that necessitates structural change to protect judges from political violence and intimidation. Democrats are describing exactly what Trump wants. Judges who are afraid, who know Trump controls their security, who understand that ruling against Trump could mean losing protection, becoming targets, putting families at risk. That fear would corrupt judicial decision-making, would make judges hesitate before blocking Trump's illegal actions, would give Trump effective control over judiciary even without formally overruling judges. Just make them too scared to rule against him. And this isn't theoretical. At recent meeting of Judicial Conference of United States, federal judge expressed concern that president could order U.S. Marshals to stop protecting judges. That sitting federal judge saying out loud that they're worried Trump will weaponize their security, will use protection as leverage, as threat, as punishment. When judges are that concerned, crisis is real. Danger is immediate. Action is necessary. Think about what happens under Marshals Act. Bill would establish U.S. Marshals Board modeled on existing board for U.S. Capitol Police. Administrative body would be composed of Chief Justice and members of U.S. Judicial Conference. Marshals for each judicial district would be selected by Chief Justice and board, not by President. And while measure would wall off Marshals' service judicial security activities from executive branch, it would allow Attorney General to request agencies' assistance on other law enforcement matters, like investigating fugitives, issuing subpoenas related to unregistered sex offenders, locating missing children. So Marshals could still help with those functions, but their primary mission of protecting judges and enforcing court orders would be controlled by judiciary, by people whose job is defending rule of law, not by president who's attacking it. That's fundamental restructuring. That's stripping power from executive branch and giving it to judicial branch. And Trump knows it destroys his ability to intimidate courts. Chief Justice Roberts said in May that judicial independence is crucial to American separation of powers system, which doesn't work if judiciary is not independent. That's Chief Justice acknowledging threat, recognizing that judicial independence is under attack, and Marshals Act is response. Is Congress acting to defend judicial independence against president who's trying to destroy it? Now let's talk about why Republicans will never let this pass. Because even though bill makes perfect sense, even though it protects rule of law, even though it prevents constitutional crisis, Republicans control both chambers, House and Senate. And they've been largely hostile to federal judges ruling against Trump administration actions. House already passed bill aimed at clamping down on federal district courts' ability to issue nationwide injunctions that have thrown spanner into White House agenda. Senate Republicans reportedly looking to get that language included in budget reconciliation package. Think about what that means. Republicans aren't trying to protect judicial independence. They're trying to destroy it. They're helping Trump weaken courts, limit their power, make them irrelevant. And Marshals Act does opposite. Strengthens courts, protects judges, ensures enforcement. So Republicans will kill it. Won't even give it hearing. Won't allow vote, because they want Trump to have power to intimidate judiciary. Some Republican lawmakers have heeded Trump's calls to remove judges, unveiled articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg and handful of other jurists. That's Congress joining Trump's attack on judges, making it bipartisan assault. And those same Republicans who want judges impeached for ruling against Trump aren't going to vote for a bill that protects those judges. That's obvious. Even though Marshals Act won't pass immediately, Democrats introducing it sends signal, makes clear that Trump's weaponization of Marshal service is intolerable, that threats to judicial independence won't be ignored, that if Democrats regain control of Congress, this will be priority, this will pass. And Trump will lose power he's been abusing, and bill puts spotlight on problem, forces conversation about Trump ordering marshals to defy courts, about threats to judges, about constitutional crisis brewing. Media has to cover it. Public learns about it. Pressure builds. Even if bill doesn't pass now, groundwork is laid for future action, for eventual reform, for protecting judiciary from authoritarian president. Think about what happens if Trump actually orders marshals to ignore court order, if judge finds Trump official in contempt, orders arrest, and Trump tells marshals stand down, don't enforce it. That's open defiance of judicial branch. That's president declaring he's above courts. That's end of separation of powers. And Marshals Act is Democrats saying, we see that coming. We're trying to prevent it. And if you don't help us prevent it, you're complicit when crisis arrives. Bottom line is this. Democrats introduced Marshals Act, transferring U.S. Marshals from Trump's control to judicial branch. Takes away Trump and Bondi's power over marshals. Gives control to Chief Justice Roberts and federal courts. Trump pulled security from former officials, attacked judges publicly, defied court orders. Judges facing record threats including pizza doxing using murdered child's name. Trump could order marshals to ignore contempt arrests creating constitutional crisis. Bill solves problem by letting judges control enforcement. Republicans won't pass it, but conversation forced. Trump's legal shield collapsing. This story continues. Stay tuned.